Ritz-Carlton in New Orleans, and I've never stayed at such a fancy hotel before. And it's in a beautiful historic building. I love it. And it's also on Canal Street, which is walking distance to many, many things, but it's also like right there at the French Quarter, which was super exciting. So we didn't even have a car. We just walked everywhere, which was unbelievable. But Ritz-Carlton, like, I want you to see how gorgeous and how historic this building is, and like the inside of it, like just walking around in this building was insane. Like, it just made me happy. And there was this like outdoor courtyard area that was so beautiful at night. There was this sort of like library games room where my mom and I would go and we'd play some card games sometimes. So beautiful. And then our room was huge and just so beautiful. And we got a discount. I gotta say, I got a discount because I did the workshop. The first day that I was there, I don't have pictures of this, unfortunately, but they had free beignets. And, you know, I'll talk about beignets later, but, you know, New Orleans is famous for beignets, but the hotel had this guy with this sort of little cart, and you could get a free beignet, and oh my gosh, they were so good. They were actually the best beignets, and I tried a bunch throughout the city, but these were so good. And they had coffee and like newspapers. It felt like the hotel was taking care of you, and you were sort of transported into this different time period. And it was just, it made me so happy to just walk around. We were staying like on Canal Street, so we did a lot of walking. It rained the first day, so it was hard to do much walking the first day, but we got to walk around the French Quarter a lot, and we were right close to Bourbon Street, so we walked down there. And the French Quarter is really interesting. Like, this is before Mardi Gras, right? So there's not as many people, but it's still like a huge social party place, but party place in the way of like people just celebrating life. That's what I like about it, right? All of these streets and the music pouring out from all of these different bars. And sometimes there was like live street performers drumming or playing instruments. It was just kind of an exciting place, like just walking down the street, super exciting, and just kind of like, it makes you feel good, it makes you want to party. So part of the city, and the, you know, this is a big city, part of the community is there were, you know, homeless people, and there were people that you could tell that were struggling with addiction. I never felt unsafe around, you know, that different groups of people. I wouldn't, as a woman, walk alone at night, but I wouldn't do that in any city. That's just like a really hard thing to grapple with, because you're like going down these like vibrant streets and everything, and you're stepping over someone that's sort of strung out a little bit. It still feels very safe, but I think like you have to embrace the city. It's got everything, right? Including people that are suffering, and it didn't detract from the experience, but it was part of the experience that couldn't be ignored. So one night we went to like a really historic theater, which is like a block from the Ritz-Carlton. So we got to walk to the theater and we saw My Fair Lady. But more than seeing the show was the theater. Like, my mom cannot stop talking about how gorgeous this theater was. That was her top moment in New Orleans, was just being in this theater. And the production was extremely well done, but the theater is just like, wherever you go, like, it's a work of art. It just feels like you're sitting in a work of art everywhere you look. It's so gorgeous. So a lot of people know that New Orleans is famous for beignets. And at first I was like, I don't even know what that was. But they're like these really yummy, it's almost like a donut, but not quite. And they are not all created equal. Like, it's famous New Orleans, so you can kind of get them anywhere. So I tried them out. I had to try them out in many different places. And oh my gosh, so you could have like a coffee and like a plate of beignets, which is a little too much, but it's so good. But there were so many different kinds. And I know there's a famous place for beignets. We never made it to there, where like people line up around the corner for these. So I wish I had made it to there. But I did, you know, try out like 4 or 5 different restaurants. You know, I had to try out the different kind of beignets. But I'll tell you what, like the beignets, the homemade beignets in the Ritz-Carlton were like phenomenal. Like, those were the first ones I had, and like nothing compared to those ones. We've talked beignets, but let's just talk food. And like, if you are a seafood lover, like obviously New Orleans is like your place. But I'm not, like, I don't eat seafood, right? I don't eat seafood or meat, so like, ugh. And I'm not drinking alcohol this year, so like, I was like, oh, what am I gonna eat? Beignets? Well, I ate a lot of beignets, but There was so much other yummy food there, like just the sauces and the spices and the combinations of food was so good. So I was like, whatever, I'm not gonna think about the food that much because I'm not gonna be able to partake in a lot of it. And there was a lot that I couldn't partake in, but there was so much yummy vegetarian food that I could have. So I just love how creative the food is, but there's like some of it was just like I got rice and beans, right? Oh my gosh, the sauces and whatever they cooked that red rice in, it was just like so delicious. Just experimenting with like some of the different foods that we don't normally get at restaurants around here was a lot of fun. The very last night we went to Antoine's restaurant, which is one of the oldest restaurants in New Orleans. And I mean, you have to make reservations, kind of hard to get in, but it's so huge and it has so many different rooms. So we were pulled in, they took us on a tour and they have these like other little rooms, and they also have these like little spectacular little rooms for like celebrities and VIPs so they can have their own kind of special experience. The place itself is unbelievable and the staff are so knowledgeable about the restaurant and its history.
Really, really big. We have a lot of wines.
Wow. So the largest wine cellar in the country.
Yes, ma'am.
Gosh. But then the food, right? So they also, like, the food was so interesting, and the drinks, like, I had to have a mocktail, which was good. But they have so many different interesting cocktails and mocktails, and the different types of foods that they serve there. It was just like the whole thing was an experience. Okay, so one of the fun things that I really wanted to do, and everybody was like, you gotta do this, you gotta do this. You go to New Orleans, you wanna do a bike tour. So we got this awesome guy. You know, you sit in the bike, there's like a bench, you sit in it, and then like he bikes around and he tailors the tour to whatever you want. So I was like, well, I wanna know a little bit more about the French Quarter, but I'd also like, I keep hearing about the Garden District. So like he basically tailored 2 hours to go to both places. He loved the history of New Orleans so much, and he'd lived there his whole life.
And then, of course, the Civil War happened. So the commander-in-chief, Nathaniel Banks, decides, well, we want this house to, for our governor, for our mansion to conduct business or whatever. And so they kicked Colonel Short out.
But it was just so informative, but also fun. And he was just so enjoyable. So it was just a fun way of experiencing New Orleans that didn't feel too touristy. It didn't feel like dry. It just like he brought New Orleans to life. So I think like one of the things about New Orleans that was just so exciting is like when you're walking down the French Quarter and Bourbon Street, or it feels like you're walking into a piece of history, whether it's like the music, or when you're experimenting like with the foods or the architecture of the buildings. Like it has this fun contemporary party feel, but also with this like, I'm also a part of history right now. Like you just, it sort of transports you and has a different feeling than a lot of other cities do.